The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. And in this episode, I'm going to talk to you about some weird and strange things that happen out on your pool route that I've experienced and that maybe some people have experienced themselves. So I'm going to cover some of the weird and bizarre happenings out there. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. Here's what that happens to me often out there on the route is when I clean a DE filter. And it's particularly a DE filter. After I clean it and recharge it with DE, the following week there'll be like algae in the pool, yellow algae in certain areas. And this water is balanced. There's no problem. And it's one of these weird things where, okay, you clean the filter. There's no algae before you clean the filter. You clean the filter because it's due and you want to prevent algae from forming. And then you get back there the next week and there's like an algae bloom. So you're scratching your head like, why is there algae in the pool? The pool's balanced, there's chlorine. And I'm not a chemist or anything, but diatomaceous earth is sand that consists of fossilized algae. So I'm going to say that there's probably a correlation between when you add fresh DE to the pool and then the week later you're having an algae bloom when you get back there. So one thing that I've been doing at these pools, and I just did a filter 2 weeks ago and I forgot to do this. I forgot to add some shock to the pool to bring the chlorine level up. And sure enough, there was algae forming in that pool and it was very frustrating. But what I've tended to do now when I do a DE filter clean is I'll bring the chlorine level up to a much higher level to kind of prevent this from happening. But it's kind of a head scratcher because you're cleaning the filter, you're doing it for a reason, and then you go back there the following week and there's algae in the pool. And so this has happened to me, so you can rest assured that it's not something that just happens to you. I've had this happen to me in my route many a times, and it's definitely a frustrating, weird thing that happens when you're trying to do the right thing, but then the result is something that you're trying to avoid in the first place. Another thing that you may run into, and this has happened to me, I've done many green pool cleanups. They've all been successful. I haven't really had problems. So you're doing maybe 5 or 6 green pool cleanups and you're getting really good results. But then you get to this one pool and you do the same routine, whether you're doing the flock method or you're doing the shock and awe method, which I prefer in my area, which is like bringing the chlorine level up to astronomical levels to take care of things. So I remember this one green pool, I was trying to get it cleared up and it just wasn't happening. And I was like, what is going on with this pool? I have the timer running 24 hours. Everything is fine. And it's just not clearing up. So I'm checking things like, is the customer turning the pool off sometime during the day? No, when I get there the next day, the pool was running, so it can't be that. And it's a real head scratcher. And then I'm standing there in front of the filter, and I'm looking at this filter, and it's a quad D filter. And I'm just looking at it very carefully, and I realized that the person that installed this filter actually has the inlet and outlet reversed. If you know anything about the quad D filter, the inlet and outlet are the same as a cartridge filter and not a D filter. So the inlet on the quad D filter is on the top, the outlet's on the bottom. A traditional D filter has the outlet on the top and the inlet on the bottom. And of course, Hayward makes these also now. And Jacuzzi, the old Jacuzzi filters from Leslie's that are black, are also the quad type D filters. And many pools have had this happen to where someone installs a quad D filter the same way they would install a traditional filter. Now Pentair's making a big effort. They have, larger labels and they have, different warnings on there. They have tags on the filters so you don't make this error when you're installing it. But this has happened to another member of my group. A new pool build was put in and the pool was turning green and he was scratching his head trying to figure out what was going on. And he realized that they too had installed a quad type D filter backwards, and so the inlet and outlet were reversed. I had a group member who had a sand filter installed this way too, and the same thing happened with the sand filter. They had the inlet and outlet reversed and the pool wasn't filtering. And I've seen a cartridge filter installed backwards once also, where the installer put the outlet and inlet reversed also. And when I took the lid off the cartridge filter, I knew there was something weird going on because there was only water halfway up the cartridges. The top part was dry and the bottom part was wet and green. And I was like, there's something definitely wrong with this cartridge filter. It's not flowing right. And sure enough, the inlet and outlet would reverse. So this is something that can happen. It's weird and it's something to be aware of out there. So if you're doing like a green pool cleanup and they have a quad type D filter, a cartridge filter, or even a sand filter, carefully trace the inlet and outlet on that filter and try to find out, where is this, where's the inlet, where's the outlet. It's pretty easy. The inlet is, of course, before the pump. The outlet is coming out of the return of the pool. And if you have these reversed, the filter definitely is not going to work correctly. The weird thing about this is that the filter pressure gauge, nothing unusual happens. I didn't notice anything weird about it, but definitely the filter is not working because you have the inlet and outlet reversed. So keep that in mind, that is a weird thing that can happen out there also to you. Speaking of weird things that can happen that are probably extremely dangerous at the same time, is a blockage of the return from the filter. And this could be very fatal to you if this happens while you're out there. Now, I had this happen on many occasions over the years. One, the customer or the builder had put in a return line where there was a kind of a waterfall effect on the wall of the pool, but he didn't plumb in a separate return line for that. And so in order to get the waterfalls to work, you would turn the Jandy valve from pool return to the waterfall. The problem here that happened, and this was kind of like almost a miraculous thing, because the pool was off at the time I got to the account. It comes on around 10 o'clock in the morning. So I was there on a Monday morning, and they had a party on Sunday night, and the sun had turned on the waterfall feature. And so after the party, for whatever reason, the pool had turned off already, and he decided to turn it back to pool return, which I guess is logical. However, he wasn't paying attention, and he actually snapped the little safety tab off the back of the Jandy valve and turned it to where it deadheaded the return. So instead of turning it back to the right, which would have turned off the waterfalls and turned on the pool return, he actually turned it straight down. And again, this only happened because he broke the tab off the back of the Jandy handle, which is really easy to do, by the way, because it's like a little plastic tab. And as these Jandy handles get old, they get a little brittle, and you just have to use a little force and you can just snap that tab off. And so he had it actually with the return off. So I get to the pool, and I like to turn the pools on myself because I want everything running when I get there. And this was a clean and clear Pentair filter. So I turned the pool on, and I'm standing right there by the equipment, and I see the pressure gauge shoot up like a rocket to like 40 psi, and it starts to gradually go more. And the tank, I actually saw bulging, and so I flipped that thing off immediately. I was lucky to be standing right next to the timer, and I traced the problem. I saw the return line deadheading the return because he overturned the Jandy valve. And this is not a good build, by the way, because this is a big safety hazard. I would have liked to have seen the waterfall effect on a separate pump here, and I recommended the customer they should have a separate pump for that feature so that this doesn't happen, but that wasn't the case. It can happen also when you're going from pool to spa mode if the customer overturns it. There's some weird valves where they're not directly perpendicular. I've had a couple of these also for pool and spa mode where they're not straight up and down on the pipe for whatever reason. And so sometimes you can overturn those also with the tab broken off. So this is a very dangerous situation, and it could be fatal if that tank would have exploded. Luckily, I was able to turn it off immediately. Whenever you see the pressure gauge spike up like that really rapidly, so if it's at 0 and it just spikes to 40 or 50, there's a blockage there, and that's a serious hazard. And of course, the tank could explode within seconds of that happening. So it's one of those things where hopefully it doesn't happen to you on your route, but just be aware that sometimes there could be a blockage in the return. Had another one where I had a Stay Right System 3 filter, and these are like indestructible filters. They'll probably survive a nuclear war. They're built so well. And this one here, I turned on the pool pump. It sounded weird to begin with, the pump. And then I looked at the filter gauge, and these Stay Right filters, the filter gauge doesn't move much on these because they're gigantic. And so normally it's at 20 psi and never moves on me. Maybe it'll go to 25. But when I turned the pool on, this one went to 40. And I can actually see the System 3 filter tank bulging also, which was kind of scary. And so I turned the pool off immediately. And so in this situation, what it was, a part of the stay right heater had broken off and lodged itself in the check valve. And this caused the blockage. The check valve wasn't opening. And so the check valve stayed closed because this piece of metal broke off the heater. It was lodged inside the pipe. And the pump was actually turning on every day like this. But because it's a System 3, Stay Right System 3 filter, it never exploded. I mean, like I said, these things are made really well. And those 8 clamps held this lid on really well. What happened is when the pool started going, there was no return pressure. The water would just go back out the skimmer line. And the pump impeller was kind of, I wouldn't say it was reversing, but since the water had nowhere to go, it was just basically going back out the skimmer. And so, of course, that's a dangerous situation also. And again, it was probably another miraculous situation where it was a Stay Right System 3 filter. Any other filter would have exploded long ago, or maybe exploded when I turned it on at that moment. So I'll give Pentair props for that filter. It's probably one of the best built filters. It's super heavy, and it withstood a whole week worth of that pool running with no way for the water to exit the return line. And then another instance where this has happened to me is I was cleaning a cartridge filter. It was a Clean and Clear Plus again. Pentair is really popular in my area. This pool had a lot of cypress trees, and I noticed when I pulled the cartridges out, they were full of cypress leaves. They're just small, stubby leaves. Cypress trees are those really skinny green trees that grow like 30 feet tall, and they have the really small little droppings. So they go right through the pump basket, obviously, at this account. And I wasn't really paying too much attention when I took the cartridges out, that there was a bunch of it in the bottom of the tank. And so I put everything back together, and I noticed when I turned it on, the pressure gauge spiked up really quick to 35 psi. So I killed it right away because I have a lot of experience with these things happening apparently. And I noticed that, it's weird. I cleaned the filter. It should be returning to the pool, but it wasn't. I even put it in a spa return, nothing. And so there was a Hayward salt cell. And I was like, well, maybe there's something wrong with the salt cell. I've had instances where there was like a lot of calcium buildup on the cell before, and that stopped a lot of the flow. So I took the salt cell off, and it was like totally compacted or impacted or totally full of the cypress droppings from the filter when I cleaned it. And so then I put 2 and 2 together really rapidly. All of this went back through the return, and then the salt cell stopped it. And so this is pretty easy to do. I took the cell off, I turned the pump on with the salt cell off of it, and then everything blew out of the line, no problem. And so whenever I would do this filter going forward, I would just take the Hayward salt cell off and clean it at that time, and that way it wouldn't have this problem. But that's kind of unusual because the cypress leaves are not a common leaf, but that definitely was impacting the filter, and it went into the return line and blocked it. So these things can happen to you. So just remember, when you turn on the pump, if you see the pressure gauge spike really rapidly, if you see the tank kind of expanding or bulging, that's a very dangerous situation. Turn that off right away and try to find the source of the blockage. If you can't find it, leave everything off and make sure the pool does not come back on, because that can be a very dangerous situation for the customer as well. And I'd like to quickly note here that if you can't safely turn off the pool within 3 to 5 seconds, that you should definitely get away from the filter. So if it's an automated system and you have to kind of get in there and kind of put it in service mode or turn off the filter and you can't reach it quick enough, I definitely would hightail it out of there and find the main breaker if possible and turn off the pool from there. You don't want to try to do this after 5 or 6 seconds pass by, because once it gets to the 10-second or longer range, that filter could explode at any moment. So if you could turn off the pump within the first 2 or 3 seconds, go ahead and do that and you should be okay. But if you can't, again, reach the timer quick enough, I would definitely get as far away from that filter as possible, because it has a potential to explode at any moment and potentially, of course, kill you, which would be really tragic. And definitely you want to take that precaution. And it's kind of hard to think in a situation like that. You may kind of panic and not know what to do. So the best thing to do is get as far away from the filter as possible And again, try to turn it off at the main breaker if you can. Of course, along those same lines, what could be very dangerous is if the pool comes on while you're actually taking the clamp off a filter or putting the clamp back on. I've had this happen on 2 occasions. Once when I was a rookie and I didn't realize that the time clock was an important thing to adjust when I'm cleaning the filter. So it just so happened that I had the filter lid off already and the timer came on and the pump turned on. But I always make sure I check the dial of the automatic timer to make sure that the pump's not going to come on, and turn off the breaker, whatever you have to do. That was kind of a mistake and nothing weird. It's just me not being smart. And then the other time it happened was with an IntelliTouch panel with an IntelliFlow pump. For some reason, there's some kind of glitch in those sometimes where you'll put the system in service mode, you'll turn off the IntelliFlow pump, and everything seems fine. But for some reason, the IntelliFlow pump has a mind of its own. It'll turn itself back on. It's probably a software problem back then. And I've had that happen on one occasion where was putting the actual filter lid back on, and then the pump fired up. I was like, what is going on here? It wasn't really hazardous at that moment, but it was definitely weird to where you're in service mode, you have the pump off, and then the IntelliFlow has a mind of its own and it came back on attached to the IntelliTouch panel. So this may have happened to you out there when you have that combination, the IntelliTouch panel and IntelliFlow pump. So what I do usually with all the automated panels is I'll just turn the breaker off to them. It's not a big deal. It's kind of like a hard reset anyway for them. And I'll just turn that panel off when I do the filter so that avoids any kind of glitch there. Something you may run into with the AquaLink system is that you get to the stop and it should be running at that time, but it's not. And you notice that maybe 2 weeks in a row that it's not coming on. The problem with the AquaLink is that you can't really access the controller unless you have access to it in the house, or maybe they have a remote. But the older AquaLink systems, usually it's just a panel in the house. You have no idea, what the program is set for, because the panel outside is pretty much blank and you just have buttons. But there's been many occasions where I get to an AquaLink by Jandy and nothing is running when it should be running. And what I'll do now, and what I realize is that for some reason there's some kind of communication error. It's it's not getting the signal from the house to the panel outside. So I'll just turn the breaker off and leave it off for about a minute, turn it back on, and sure enough, the pump comes on, everything lights up, and it's running at its regular scheduled time at that moment. So I've had one where this would happen all the time to it, where every month or two, it would lose the signal, lose the program, and it would be off when it's supposed to be running, and I would just flip the breaker on that one. And that was a problem account where I just was constantly having to babysit it and flip the panel until the customer got an upgraded system. That was something that I ran into. So you may run into an automated system like an older AquaLink where it just doesn't have the program running when it's supposed to, and you just go to that pool and realize that it's not running at that time. That's why I like to set the runtime for the automated systems when I'm at the account so that I can access it and I'll be able to know if it's running and working properly. But I found that happens typically or just about all the time with the AquaLink panels and not with the Pentair or Hayward systems. The AquaLink seems to lose a signal, especially the older RS models or the earlier versions of those. And so keep an eye on that if you're out there and you realize that, hey, this pool should be running, but it's not, and you see the AquaLink panel, turn the breaker off, leave it off for about a minute, and see if that solves the problem. Another weird thing that's happened before, since I'm talking about automated systems, is that on the Pentair EasyTouch or just about any automated system, if you have overlapping programs, they're going to supersede each other. So I had this one customer, for whatever reason, kept on adding run programs into his EasyTouch, and he kept adding more and more programs. And when I got there to check it out and fix it, there was like 7 program runtimes overlapping each other set up, and he was wondering why the pool was running so much. And so that's another thing that's kind of weird sometimes, is that the customer will set overlapping programs. Maybe he'll put one on the cleaner circuit, one on the spillway circuit, one on the actual pump circuit. But just be aware that whatever program is running, they overlap, and the pool could be on for a very long time. If you notice that the pool is running an unusual amount of time or running when it's not supposed to be, go in there on the EasyTouch panel and check to see if maybe there's some overlapping programs. Same thing with any automated system. And of course, sometimes the relay fails on an automated system and the pump's running 24 hours. So if a customer texts you or messages you saying, hey, the pump's not turning off, a lot of times the relay that controls the pump has failed. It's really easy to test. Usually there's an open relay somewhere else on the panel, and I'll just move the pump to another relay. And if that circuit turns the pump on and off, then I know that's the problem. I did have a weird system where the pool light would come on randomly in the middle of the day, sometimes on the weekends, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with that one. It was an AquaLink, and I even called an electrician in, and they couldn't figure that out either. It was just a phantom pool light turning on by itself whenever it wanted to, connected to an AquaLink system. Again, it was an older system also, so I would say a lot of the older systems could just develop glitches. If you have an older comp pool system, those can be very glitchy as they get older, and you're going to find sometimes the pump will come on, phantomly when it's not programmed to. And definitely, I think it's just the fact that those are just getting old. If you have an old SunTouch, I've had some weird things happen with those also. And to me, I just think the circuits are getting old and weird things happen with automation when the circuits start to get old and the brain of that system starts to age like anything else. But you may experience a lot of weird things on your pool route. I've experienced them also. Maybe put them in the comments section if you have some strange things that have happened out there that you want to comment about. If you're watching this, or if you're listening to this particular one on YouTube, you can put comments there in the comments section. But that's just my take on a few of the weird things that I've seen happen out there on my pool route. If you're looking for other podcasts I recorded, you can go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, and on the banner, click on that podcast icon, and that'll take you to a drop-down menu of other podcasts I recorded. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more about my coaching program on my site, poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro.